What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Mr. Drosty History. Today, we're going to dip into the United States Civil War, and we're going to start off by talking about the Battle at Fort Sumter in April 1861. The Battle of Fort Sumter is what officially starts the U.S. Civil War. But in order to talk about what happened at Fort Sumter, we need to give things a little bit of context. We need to look at what was happening in the months prior. Now, obviously, we could spend hours talking about all the buildup that led to the fighting beginning. I'm going to try to, like I always do on the channel, kind of sum this up for you very briefly. And in order to do that, we're actually going to look at some quotes from Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address when he took office, March 4th, 1861, because I think it's very important to look at Lincoln's words that set the stage for the Civil War. Now, before Lincoln took office, 7 states had already seceded from the Union following his election in November of 1860. If you look at this map here off to the side, you can see all of those red states had already seceded before Lincoln actually became president. All right, so South Carolina started things off in December of 1860, and 6 more states followed South Carolina's lead. As you can see, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. That all happens before Lincoln enters the door of the White House. So when he goes up on the stage at the Capitol, March 4th, 1861, he's got to address this. And he wants to be very careful with the words that he is using to address the now Confederate States of America, because he wants to bring them back into the United States. But he also doesn't want to look too aggressive, but he wants to be firm in his words. So we're going to give this context. We're going to look at a couple of quotes from Lincoln's first inaugural address here, and then we're going to parlay that into looking at the Battle of Fort Sumter the following month, which begins the American Civil War. So let's get to it. Lincoln takes office in March of 1861. Virginia, North Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and Arkansas, all slave states, had not seceded at that moment in time. Some of them would eventually. So Lincoln worries that if the U.S. uses force against the Confederacy, these other states will then join. And what do I mean by that? Well, the states that had already seceded, like South Carolina, there were military bases there, United States military bases. And these new Confederate states that have now split off from the U.S., they demanded that the United States hand over those bases to them. And the United States obviously was saying, no, those are our military bases. You have no real ability. You don't have the ability to secede. They thought it was illegal. So you can't just take our military bases from us. But Lincoln worried that if he takes office and he sends in the U.S. military to fight the rebels in South Carolina, it's going to look bad, and all these other states are going to secede next. So he's very mindful of that. So when he speaks at his inauguration, he's very firm about what he's saying, but he tries to sound peaceful as well. He says secession would not be permitted. He says the union of these states is perpetual, which means forever. And he does vow to hold the federal property in the South, that it belongs to us, the United States, and that he would enforce United States laws there. He says, quote, "In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, are the momentous issues of civil war. The government will not assail you. You can have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors." In other words, he's not going to attack them. "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection." March 4th, 1861. This is an actual picture taken, Lincoln's first inauguration. He also said, "Apprehensions seem to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of a Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehensions. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all the public speeches of him who now addresses you, himself. I do but quote from one of those speeches when I declare that I have no purpose directly or indirectly to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so." In other words, Lincoln is saying he is not going to ban slavery where it already exists. Yes, he's spoken about banning it in the territories in the West. But here he says again, he has no intention of outright banning slavery, and he's not going to for a few years yet. Why is he addressing slavery here in his inauguration speech? Why? Because the states seceded over slavery. That is why he is specifically right here. I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery where it exists, because that is the issue that has caused the United States to break apart. So the war begins in South Carolina at a base, a U.S. military base called Fort Sumter. So, like I was saying a second ago, the Confederate States started taking over federal land, including military bases. They said since they seceded from the Union, this land now belongs to them. And obviously, the U.S. government does not agree. So, Fort Sumter is on an island outside of Charleston, South Carolina. You can visit it today, as you see in the picture in the background. And it was very low on living supplies, notably food. Confederates were demanding that the Union troops surrender the base and leave and hand it over to them. But the Union troops, I should say the United States troops, said no, their orders were to hold the base, that it's United States property, but they needed supplies. So Lincoln sent supplies to Fort Sumter, but he very specifically did not send weapons, he did not send ammunition, and he did not send any more soldiers than were already there. He specifically did that because he was so mindful of not wanting to appear to be the aggressor. He doesn't want to attack them first because he's worried those other states are going to secede if he does. So he sends a message to the South Carolina governor and he says, "Look, I'm sending supplies with an unarmed force of men, mostly food for the soldiers that are down there." Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederate States, calls for an attack before the Union supplies arrive. He tells them to fire upon Fort Sumter, the Confederates. And that is how the Civil War starts. The Southern forces attack the United States military at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. And they bombard this base for it's something like 36 hours. Remarkably, nobody died during this battle. Lots of destruction, explosions, artillery fire going on. Nobody died, North or South, during this battle. When it's over, the North, the United States, surrenders the base to South Carolina. They're outmanned. They don't have enough people, and they're surrounded by the enemy. In the official surrender ceremony, I guess you could call it, there was an explosion, a weapons explosion, and two men died. But nobody actually, and that was, inadvertent, wasn't supposed to happen. But nobody actually died in the first battle, the Civil War itself, which is kind of amazing. So that was April 12th, 1861. Lincoln's barely in office for a month. He took office in early March. 2 days later, April 14th, the Union surrenders. Like I said, thousands of shots, no death. Right after this, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas vote to leave the United States, and the war is on. So when you look at this map down here next to this picture of Fort Sumter, what you see, the blue states are the United States of America. The gray states are the now new Confederate States of America that have split off from the United States. And these green states that you see, this would be Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware, um, are border states. All right. Some people throw Delaware in, I guess. I threw it in because it's a slave state. They had slavery in Delaware. Maryland, slavery. Kentucky, slavery. Missouri, slavery. Okay, so nobody really knew as this got underway after all these other states had seceded, would they secede too? And those border states with slavery, they had people in their states that fought for both sides. but they never officially left the United States like these grayed out states did. Now, West Virginia, you see here, that used to all be Virginia. But in this area of West Virginia, the people did not support secession. And so they split off from the rest of the state and stuck with the United States. As you can see, the Union, the blue, but while Virginia became part of the Confederacy. So we had a new state created out of the Civil War. Now, the big concern as this war gets underway, what's going to happen with Maryland? And the reason we're so concerned with that is because Washington, D.C. is right here on the border between Virginia and Maryland. So if Maryland splits off and goes to the Confederate side, our nation's capital would be surrounded by Confederate property, Virginia and Maryland. Now, Maryland will stay in the Union, the United States, throughout the war, but it was of constant concern what would happen if they went to the southern side. And because of that, Lincoln went pretty far in constraining the rights of citizens in Maryland so that there was no subordination to the government, that there was no conspiring against the United States government. You could not speak out against the United States government. Your freedom of speech was very much curtailed in Maryland during the Civil War.